If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
This is the Cats Roundtable with John Catsimatidis.
Everywhere around the world, they come to America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they come into America.
Good morning, tri-state area. One great show for you again today. Governor David Paterson does say what is going on in our state. Steve Cates looking up in the sky. Harold Holzer, Manhattan historian, and what secrets does Manhattan have that we haven't been told? Joe Hathaway, Joseph Hernandez, Bart Schwartz on NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority, John Terrett on the economy, Dr. Peter Michalos, and Stephen Phillip, the New York City Partnership. What's going on in our city? Let's start off with Michael Stoller and the Real Estate Report.
Good morning. This is Mike Stoller for the Stoller Real Estate Report. What's happening in the rental and the condominium market in New York City? Seems to be doing well, and I have an individual who's very active in the market today. His name is Jeff Zanity, who is the managing partner at King's Capital LLC. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So, in a short comment, what's happening in the market with regard to condos, since you seem to be rather active in that market?
Yeah, recently we've shifted from more rentals to condos. It's been a active market lately. I could tell you that some markets, such as downtown Manhattan and north areas of Brooklyn, have been, I want to say, hot or have been very active. I'm seeing recently that there's more cash buyers, and people want quality, whether it's quality neighborhood, quality product. So I've been seeing a lot more activity on the condo side, and that's where our focus has been lately.
In the purchasing of properties and converting them to condos?
Converting or ground up.
Okay, so for example, I know you're doing some things in downtown Brooklyn. Why don't you tell me about that?
So recently we acquired a vacant brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, 138 Joralemon. The building was an 11-unit building, vacant, and besides dealing with the best and highest use, there's also some challenges today in paperwork and dealing with legalities to renting out units. So we ended up going the condo route, where we're converting the building from 11 units on a 5-story building to 3 primary residences.
Oh, so it's going to be 3 out of 11.
Out of 11, and it's a 5-story building. There's going to be 1 duplex, the garden with the 2nd floor. The 3rd floor is going to be a simplex, and then to use the rooftop, we're going to have the 4th and 5th floor as its own apartment.
It's a walk-up or an elevator?
It's a walk-up, but, there's no product in some of these neighborhoods, Brooklyn Heights, Soho, Greenpoint. And if you deliver a good product and you have that home type of feeling, it's a different type of buyer than the normal tower or glass type of amenitized building.
Now, what amenities are you providing? I mean, you don't have much space to provide that much amenities.
It's less about amenities, more about finishes, the layouts, and also maximizing space. So we're going to be utilizing the roof to try to create some sort of wellness feel, maybe with a cold plunge or something that's more suited for, family that want to have outdoor space, along with the garden space where you try to maximize the look and feel of that home type of buyer.
Now, what are you doing in Park Slope?
So Park Slope is interesting. We're actually doing a project now in South Park Slope. And what we found recently is there's a lot of owners that have property that need help maximizing the property, whether it's through development or repositioning. And we're doing a joint venture on 2 different properties. One is on 23rd and 5th, and one is on 20th and 5th. So not exactly prime Park Slope, Mike, but as they call Greenwood Heights or South Slope.
Right.
And we're doing a ground-up development. One's a 25-footer, 4 units, and one's a 50-footer, which is 10 units. And we're just trying to capture the needs and demand of the market for that neighborhood.
So what do you think these units will be selling for?
I think we underwrote about $11.50 a foot, but One thing that we don't do with our underwriting is there's a lot of trend in terms of where the market's going a year or 2 years out as the project is finished. And I think we're going to see a little bit higher than $1,200 a foot, but only time will tell.
What effect has tariffs had on your business?
Tariffs have had some effect on the business. I'll tell you the biggest challenge when it comes to development is really the finishes. It's not necessarily the labor. It's not necessarily the land cost. If you want to do very nice products, such as certain stone or certain type of tiles, importing from Italy, it can get pretty expensive.
What about labor costs today?
Luckily I don't deal with anything that involves prevailing wages or more than 99 units.
Right, you don't have 99 units, right?
No, so right now we're okay, but I can tell you that, labor is still pretty steady. Luckily we've been okay with that part.
Let's talk about the Hell's Kitchen project that you were working on.
We just finished 2 projects there. One was on 48th and 9th. It was an old dormitory from the Bank of China, and the Bank of China owned this 38,000 square foot building on 48th and 9th. About a year ago, we actually completed another building across the street, 356 West 48th, and the building was a complete gut. We gutted the building down to the studs. There were some structural issues, and we turned it into 39 new primary residences.
At what rent?
It may shock you a little bit. We're getting about $4,700 for 2 bedrooms. They're about sub 600 square feet.
That building is elevated.
Elevator, yeah.
Right.
Elevator, rooftop. There's a courtyard for some of the residences, gym, and storage.
How are you doing on getting financing for some of these projects today?
A year ago was quite challenging, and when I mean challenging is it was very costly. And I think right now there's a lot of these debt shops that have popped up over the past 3 years as people were shifting from equity to debt. There's been more competition, which has been good for us as operators. But I could tell you that it's still not there yet, but we're seeing a good demand in financing. And the number one thing for us is just keeping a good relationship with our existing lenders so we can start to the next project as we finish the first.
I'd like to thank you for being here. I hope that you'll be back on my show later in the season.
Thank you,
again.
Mike. Thanks for having me.
The Cats Roundtable.
We have a new appointee as the Manhattan Borough Historian. With us today is Harold Holzer. He has been newly appointed by the Borough President of Manhattan as the Historian of Manhattan. I didn't know every borough has its own historian. Tell us about, we got a few minutes today on a Sunday morning, and a lot of our listeners are from the island of Manhattan that we bought for, how much did we buy it for? $14, was it? Or what?
No, $24.
$24. Okay, with inflation.
400 years ago. We're about to have the anniversary of the purchase.
I look forward to the anniversary. I hope I get invited.
Okay.
Tell us about a little historical stuff about Manhattan Island that nobody knows.
Well, nobody knows there was a Belgian immigration crisis in the 17th century. I just learned that myself. When the notice went out that
You mean they had a migrant crisis?
We had a migrant crisis.
How many years
no
ago?
Ice, no ice except in the winter. And yes, we did for centuries. And you know what? All of the people who immigrated eventually became part of the Manhattan community and did well for themselves and by us, which is a lesson maybe we should learn. John, I didn't know about this position very much about it either. I've actually known the 2 predecessors, but Borough President Brad Hoylman Siegel, who is actually being sworn in later this Sunday afternoon, his official inauguration at Lincoln Center, he called me up and said, I want you to do this because you've written 50 books about the Civil War and Lincoln, and I want someone who's written about history. And we have all these plans to do tours and websites about the 250th anniversary, about the Civil War in Manhattan, about the Dutch settlement, about the native peoples. And we're going to have a lot of fun, and I think it's going to help spur extra tourism as well.
I hear that there's parts of Manhattan, when you dig down deep enough, you find another part of Manhattan, a different part of the city.
You do. And in fact, when they built the Moynihan Federal Courthouse in Lower Manhattan a few decades ago, they found a slave burial ground, which is now known as the African Burial Ground. Construction was halted. An entire project came up from Washington and other cities and examined with great respect the remains. In those days, this was the northern part of the island, so they shipped enslaved people up there when they died to be buried. And as they say in my part of Manhattan, who knew? We have a lot to learn.
I watch his History Channel sometimes. Deep down in Japan, deep down underneath the water, they found whole cities. And in China, which is a civilization that's 6,000, 8,000 years old, they found,
right.
If you dig down enough, they find old cities. So, I mean, there's so many things that we have to know. And when did Columbus sail the ocean blue? 1492.
1492, it rhymes, yeah.
So, I mean, we're only 500 years behind versus some of the things,
right.
Some are 6,000 years behind and 10,000 years behind.
We have centuries of Native American history in Manhattan, too, and every once in a while people excavate and learn about that. You know, there is a new building you may have noticed going up on 5th Avenue and 43rd Street. It's gigantic. It's overwhelming. That plot of land was once an orphan asylum for black children, the most modern orphanage in New York City. And during the 1863 draft riots in New York, rioters burned it down to drive and trapped the black children inside for a while.
Oh my God!
More than 200. They got out, and I think the borough president wants to have a plaque put on that building to acknowledge that one of the worst acts of insurrection and mob rule took place there, and it's part of the history that we should remember as well as the stuff we celebrate, I think.
Harold Holzer, I hope you come on more often and give us any updates on anything interesting that you find out.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break.
Looking for financial insights you can trust?
How do you protect yourself as an investor? What's the strategy?
I think it's really simple. I think you just want to be diversified in your portfolio.
The Payne family brings real-world experience to every conversation.
Well, I think that's the problem right now, is a lot of people that are close to retirement, they're taking so much risks. And if we do get a big sell-off, it could derail their retirement.
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best our nation has to offer, especially when it comes to healthcare. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families' health. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care. Rural Americans deserve access to the best our nation has to offer, especially when it comes to health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families' health. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. With us today is Governor David Paterson. Well, Governor Paterson, what's on your mind this morning?
Well, I think what's on my mind is not as important as what is on the administration's mind when President Trump's tariff program, which was expanded, was ruled to be outside the law by the United States Supreme Court. Now, I don't think the administration should get too upset over this. We have a United States Senate. We have a House. I'm sure they could pass the legislation to overturn that, but that would mean there would have to be some kind of an agreement on what the limits for tariffs would actually be. So it was a kind of stunning decision just in the fact that the court ruled that way, but I don't think it's going to be a big deal moving forward where the administration is. The big deal, I think, is President Trump's threat to address the problems caused by Iran within what would now be 9 to 14 days from as we speak, John, over the issue of Iran interfering with the protests there and also Iran castigating and in many ways eliminating and killing opposition leaders to their administration. Whether or not President Trump would launch a full frontal attack on Iran or whether he would try to strike some kind of deal, I actually think that his future and also the future of this country almost mandates that he does something in Iran, because years ago when I was young and every time we went into some other country, I saw that as a high crime. The fact is, it's a different world now. There is absolute evil in different parts of the world and none greater than Iran. So if he goes right ahead, it'll be fine with me.
I'm not sure the Supreme Court did enough of their homework, because during the press conference he had on Friday, he had so many other alternatives. What I would have done is if a country like ABC country, and if they said to me, we want our money back, I'd say, okay, don't count on us to protect you when Putin invades you. What would they say then?
I think they would start to negotiate and would accept the same proposal that the Supreme Court struck down.
Look, I respect the Supreme Court, but I'm not sure they thought it out completely.
I think it would have been taken far more seriously if they had gone into some depth about what the ramifications of the tariff policy is now. They did not seem to spend too much time, from the little that I read, really saying, oh, this is terrible, look what you did, it's going to kill this one or that one. And they didn't say that. It was more of, to me, an academic decision, which could, of course, be reversed by the House and Senate, and the president could sign that, and then they'd have to find something else to be academic about.
What else is on your mind on a Sunday morning?
Well, John, I was fascinated that you introduced Harold Holzer. He has always been a unique a person who was called on to give the history of what happened in different events at different particular times in New York's history. He was very instrumental during the fiscal crisis in 1970, I guess it was 75, 77, trying to create an understanding among the mayor at the time and the council members who were at odds. So it was great to hear that. And then, of course, the landmarks and how they existed and the ones that were there that are no longer there is always fascinating to me, who was a history major at Columbia. I wouldn't have minded if they had made me the Manhattan historian, but, I was beaten out by a better guy.
Well, thank you, Governor Patterson, and we'll get back to you real soon.
Take care.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is John W. Allen, and he's the co-founder and chairman and CEO of the China Corporation. It's Chinese New Year's. John Allen, tell us what the China Corporation is and what is Lunar New Year like in China in today?
Well, I'll start with Lunar New Year because I love dumplings, and China New Year is famous for its dumplings, and I've had many of them. I love Chinese food, and particularly Chinese dumplings. So we'll start with that. But I've been involved with China for decades, many decades. First with the Chinese Cultural Foundation, run by Elizabeth Wang, and you've been very instrumental in helping that.
I guess you and Elizabeth Wang, and along with our friend from AIG, Hank Greenberg, and we all supported having a better way of life together.
Well, you know, John, it's interesting you mentioned Hank Greenberg because he has the same philosophy about China as you and I do. And on many occasions, he has stood up in front of the Chinese Cultural Foundation presentation and said, the two most important countries in the world today are the U.S. and China. And if we get along, we will create a much better world. So let's get along. So
the
we
truth
share
is,
that common.
I like that. I like that common sense. The Lunar New Year. It's Lunar New Year, and give us the pulse of what's going on in China right now.
First of all, China has 4 times the population of the U.S., and the real race seems to be in advanced AI general intelligence. And I think that, with a population that works hard all the time, I think that we need to join forces on how AI will affect both countries. But I think in the short term, China has adapted very, very well to a lot of the tariffs that Trump has put on the country, because China has many, many markets, particularly in Africa and Latin America. And those countries are extremely receptive to Chinese goods and services. I've spent a lot of time, particularly in Brazil, and I can tell you one of my good friends is the head of the China-Brazil Chamber of Commerce, and he is a big believer in strengthening that relationship. And so even though the tariffs to China that Trump may put on are very high, China has many, many alternative markets. So I think that maybe we had some hiccups on a temporary basis, but the medium to long term is very positive. And I'm hoping that when Trump and Xi Jinping get together, they will realize that and open some more doors to cooperation. Because why should we fight somebody? As I go right back to the Chinese general, Sun Tzu, who in 5th century BC, he wrote The Art of War, and he said, if you reach a common ground with your enemy, have you not defeated them without going to war? And as we know, when Lincoln went to Gettysburg, he reflected the same thing. He said, if you work together with your enemy, you can come to a common solution and avoid war. In the long term, I think that the writing's on the wall. China is being 4 times larger and with so many hardworking, brilliant people. I just hope that we get enough Chinese here in the U.S. and enough Americans in China so that we're all partners. We're not the adversaries.
I speak to this guy that's on our shows all the time, Gordon Chang, and he feels the world is coming to an end in China. Then I speak one-on-one with President Trump, and he feels that he can make a deal with President Xi. Tell me what your pulse is.
Well, I have many Chinese friends, many of whom go back and forth. And one of my friends, who's a brilliant financier, he just came back. He said, I observed and met with a lot of my friends here, and the Chinese people work very, very hard. They're very focused, much more so than Americans. And he's an American Chinese American. That drive and that focus is really going to put China ahead. And there are doubters and there are dissidents and there are people that criticize China, both in China and U.S. Kind of hard to do it in China right now. But even in the short term, I think the pulse signs are that there's some very positive things going on in China. If you look at the United States, particularly in the field of AI, some of the greatest AI entrepreneurs come from China. In fact, bring them over. We need more. One example is at MIT, where they have some of the smartest people in the world. They actually have an AI course that's run by a Chinese student at MIT. Even though you hear, and particularly here in the U.S., we hear negative things about China because the press loves to point out the negative. But I think for on the ground in China, from the reports I hear and from the friends I know there, is things are definitely on the right track for China. And there's a sense of optimism, particularly optimism in terms of their competition with the U.S. It's not worrisome, but I think positive in a way, as long as we can collaborate rather than compete.
We got 30 seconds left. What else you want to tell the American people about China?
All I'd say is go out and try some of those wonderful Chinese dumplings today and enjoy the Chinese food because it's one of the most enjoyable, interesting, and delightful things you will ever do. So happy Chinese Lunar New Year's. And as I say, when I converted my languages, I learned how to say, hello, how are you? Ni hao, wai ni.
Well, John Allen, I look forward to breaking bread with you and talking more about China because the closer we work together, the better it is for all.
Hear, hear, John. Onward and upward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. With us today is Bart Schwartz. He's the founder and chairman of Guidepost Solutions. They provide compliance and investigative services. He was also the chief of the criminal division of the United States Attorney's Office in Southern District. And when there was a problem with the New York City Housing Authority, called NYCHA, the United States Attorney's Office, run by Mr. Berland at the time, Berman, appointed Bart Schwartz to see what the problems are. Well, Bart Schwartz, you're on first base right now. What happened?
Well, there were so many problems at NYCHA, and NYCHA was not facing them, that finally the city, NYCHA, the federal government all agreed in a very lengthy document of the goals that NYCHA had to achieve, problems that it had to face, and the things that it had to do. And it was my job to oversee their compliance with that agreement. I was not a receiver, I was a monitor. So I had a limited authority, but I had a lot of authority when it came to what was in the agreement.
What were the findings? I mean, how many NYCHA apartments are there in New York?
John, it's enormous. It's approximately, as best people can tell, it's approximately 500,000 people, about 175,000 apartments. There were 2,300 buildings with people living in them, and over 300 developments or campuses. So it's really, on its own, it's one of the largest cities in the country.
The problems with that, empty apartments or people that are not paying rent, et cetera, et cetera. What were your biggest apartments that you were facing? Security, people feeling safe walking around.
John, there were many serious problems there. I would say, though, the one I put at the top of my list is lead poisoning of children. Children under 6 who are poisoned by lead and their brains are damaged, there's no way to reverse that. So day in and day out, I told my team and reminded them that that is the most important thing to be doing. We can't waste any days. But there were many other problems there. The culture was terrible. The employees, even management, for them failure was always an option. And so when they failed, there were no consequences, so they kept failing. There was a lack of discipline. They didn't use modern methods to deal with the cleaning and with the maintaining of the capital aspects of the buildings. They didn't have a code of conduct. They didn't pay any attention to ethics. It may sound a little soft, but the fact is when you can influence a culture at an organization so that they have values-based ethics, you can solve a lot of problems. There are two kinds of compliance. There's values-based compliance, and then there is organizational compliance, where that's rules made by people. But the basic compliance is values-based. And if you can get people to understand what the values are and to have the right values, it could influence the entire operation. And we spent a lot of time on that. Despite all of the problems there, we made some very effective improvements at NYCHA. Not only through the work that we did, but the experts we brought in to teach NYCHA how to use the best methodology that the private sector was using.
We have a new mayor in town, and he wants more affordable housing. If you were to be able to advise him, what would you say to him, the mistakes of NYCHA versus the future affordable housing?
Well, John, I would say the biggest thing would be that the failure to recognize that even if you have the structures, you must maintain them. It's not just that the apartment is available, it's that the building is maintained, that there's training, that there are inspections, that you limit and try to eliminate corruption. There's a lot that has to be done. It's not simply saying that there's an apartment or there's a building and putting people in it. You've got to make sure that that building is maintained and that the people who are responsible for maintaining it are properly trained.
Bart Schwartz, thank you so much for the update, and let's continue to talk about it, because the people in affordable housing deserve better, but the people, the citizens of city of New York and in the United States deserve better too. But let's figure it out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Joseph Hernandez. He ran for mayor in the city of New York last year. Now he's running for New York State Controller. And Joseph, you want to run for Controller of the state of New York. What would you do different?
Yeah, thank you, John, for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm running for Comptroller because I'm just trying to pay back the debt that I owe to America. You know, as I mentioned to you, as you know, I'm a Cuban immigrant. I came here at the age of 7, and this country has given me so much, and I feel like I need to pay back. And honestly, New York is in a lot of trouble. New York fiscally is in a lot of trouble. I mean, you're seeing what's going on at the state and city level. We're just in a financial crisis, in my humble opinion. So we need somebody who really knows how to run things and knows how to manage money. Tom's a nice guy. Everybody that I speak to says he's a great guy. So I'm not questioning his character as an individual, but the performance says a lot. And I mean, if you look at the returns of the fund, which is one of the roles of the comptroller's office, you know, those returns are incredibly low. It's about 5.8% return. Just to put it into perspective, the Treasury's return about 4.25%. So he's not far out from the Treasury returns, which is really dismal performance in my opinion. So the pension fund's not performing. The other thing is, you know, we have massive fraud and abuse in the system, especially around Medicaid, around the MTA, I would argue, and you know, the Department of Education is one of our largest budgets. We need to kind of see what's going on there as well. And unfortunately, nothing's been done about that. Nobody's really scrutinized those agencies or those entities, and we got to do that. We got to do that. So I plan to build an in-house investment team to increase the returns of the pension fund, which is a $300 billion fund, massive fund, one of the largest in America. And then in terms of the fraud and abuse, I want to form what I call the in-house fraud strike team, which is going to be made up of forensic accountants and prosecutors that know how to prosecute criminal financial crimes. We're going to clean up shop, and then the last thing we want to do with the office is we want to invest in New York. Part of what the fund does, it does a lot of venture investments and a lot of new company investments and so forth. So what we want to do is we want to invest in New York. We want to go ahead and invest in the upper parts of the states and the western parts of the states that have really been left behind economically, and bring some great companies to that area so that we have, the next generation of taxpayers, but also the next generation of jobs for our kids. And I plan to execute on that like I do everything else, and from a business perspective. And look, no critique to the current comptroller, but the reality is performance is not there and oversight is not there. We got
So in other words, you would invest more money into the New York State system.
I would do what economic development venture funds do. And again, look, you have to use your fiduciary duty is to make sure you get an internal rate of return on the investments. But you can do that. You can do good investments and bring good companies to New York. So my strategy is to effectively incentivize companies to move to the state of New York by investing in them from an equity perspective. So you get returns on the investment and you get returns on having those companies here and creating jobs. And I think if you do that aggressively, and I plan to do it very aggressively, plan to allocate $10 billion to do that, I think you're going to have success.
One of the problems we have in New York, it's a state where we have bigger exodus than people coming
Absolutely. It's a real problem. I mean, look, there's about 82,000 people that pay the majority of the taxes for the state of New York. And there's about 735
and I think the statistics are 2% of the New Yorkers are paying 48% of the taxes.
Correct.
And the fact is, the new mayor is pushing the governor to raise the amount of taxes. And, I point out that the exodus will continue even more.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to see, and you're already seeing it. Look, I've had good friends that are in the investment community, and they're saying, you know what, screw it, I'm going to Florida. And you don't want that. These people are the ones that create jobs, and they pump money into the economy. They're important for the tax base. And as we increase the budget on expenditures, which is what we've done, this current city budget has an extra $11 billion of expenses. Our state budget is $262 billion, and it's insanity. I mean, these budgets are bigger than most
we're almost
countries.
$300 billion because they're proposing $127 billion just for New York City.
This is government run amok. We need to change it. I'm really glad to be partnering up with Bruce Blakeman, who's really an operator. He's ran Nassau County like New York should be run. People feel safe there, and people feel happy there. And I think we got to replicate that across the state. So I'm proud to be partnering up with him and the rest of the GOP candidates to be able to change the trajectory of New York, because if we don't, New York is not going to be around for our kids.
Joe Hernandez, thank you so much for coming on this Sunday morning.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you and appreciate everything you do. God bless.
There's an election coming up in New Jersey. With us today is Joe Hathaway. He's the former mayor in Randolph, New Jersey, and he is running for a congressional seat in, where is it? Essex County, and...
We got about half of Morris County, some of Essex and Passaic as well, John.
And you're running for Governor Sherrill's former congressional seat.
That's right.
And I understand you're running against a lady that was an assistant to Bernie Sanders, the Senator of Vermont?
That's correct.
You went to Yale University, I understand. Do they know you're running as a Republican?
I went to Yale, and yet I still have some common sense I was able to bring back home, John. I know it sounds crazy. But that's been our platform from day one, about common sense, bringing the same work ethic, the same results that we get done at the local level. We need to bring that mayor's mindset down to Washington. That's the only way we're going to fix the problems that we have in New Jersey.
And you were a mayor, so you had to have some common sense, because you knew you had to learn that you had to pick up the garbage on time, and you had to learn that you had to clean up the snow when it was snowing. Et cetera, et cetera.
Listen, it's about getting things done that impact people's lives, right? And whether it was, making sure garbage gets picked up on time, or making sure that, major infrastructure projects like Route 10 are safe and effective for our travelers, or even things that impact people in small ways, right? I'm a young dad. I have 3 little ones at home. When I first got on the council, one of the first things we did, I noticed none of the restrooms in our parks had changing tables for parents with babies. That was one of the first things we changed. It's not about necessarily how many dollars you're spending or what the big impact is. It's about doing things for the people that rely on you. That's the same type of mentality we can bring to Washington to try to change some lives here in Jersey.
I know it's a big issue among parents in New Jersey, New York, all over the place. If you had a daughter playing on the soccer team and there was a male wanted to play in the girls' soccer team, what would you say?
Well, listen, that kind of stuff isn't going to fly with me. We need to protect women's sports. We need to protect women overall. Biological men playing in women's sports, things like that, that is something I'm completely opposed to. I'm a dad of 2 young daughters. I hope they both grow up to be tremendous athletes, very strong, independent women, and I want them to be successful in all things, not having to go against an unfair advantage playing like things like playing against biological men in their sports.
Give me another major issue that you're emotional about protecting your kids and protecting all New Jerseyites.
Sure. Well, listen, when you talk about protecting our kids, nowadays, John, this is all about social media and being online and how we got to make sure we have guardrails for our kids when it comes to, the social media algorithms that are keeping them, scrolling on their phones, and make sure, like the old days, get them back outside, playing sports, being engaged, being with their friends. Those are things I think I see a lot of parents care about, but also we have to be protecting our communities and improving and working with our local law enforcement, making sure that they have the tools they need. As a mayor in Randolph, I was the first mayor in the last about 3 or 4 years to fully fund and fully staff our police department at the local level. Parents come to our district to be safe, to live in communities that are safe. My opponent, you know what her message is on law enforcement? Defund the police at every single level. That's not something that's going to fly with NJ11 parents.
You don't want to defund the police.
Nope.
You need the police to protect our kids. Well, we'd love to have you on again sometime, and please come on. The election is April
16th.
So please come on before that and tell us the progress you're making in New Jersey.
John, we're making tremendous progress right now. This election is about the future of our party, one of hard work, one of common sense against radical socialism. Everyone in New Jersey can come together on that notion. That's going to be the path to success here. All of your listeners, too, can find more about us at joehathawayforcongress.com.
Thank you so much for coming on this Sunday morning, and we'll catch up again real soon.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. With us today is Steve Cates, otherwise known as Dr. Sky. Steve Cates, what do you have in mind this morning?
Well, happy Sunday to you and the listeners, John. How about a couple of great topics? How about rocket fuel from water? A former SpaceX engineer, he started his own new company called General Galactic, and he aims to use common water to replace electrical and chemical rocket propulsion. How? How would he do it? By splitting hydrogen and oxygen in water via electrolysis, and then burn the hydrogen gas with the oxygen as the oxidizer to create propulsion. So this thrust, John, would be more for chemical rockets. But how about this? For greater fuel use from water, they plan to turn the oxygen from electrolysis into plasma energy with strong electrical currents. So maybe the days, John, of chemical rockets, well, maybe they'll be going bye-bye. But the bigger mystery is, how do we get propulsion with warp drives? That's the great mystery. But John, a guy that was working on so much of this, we all know about Albert Einstein. But here's a few facts about him that many people may not know. The young Einstein didn't start speaking clearly until he was well into his second year. And he's referred to by some as the dopey one. How terrible. But John, Einstein rose to world fame, as many know, with his two great revolutionary works, the general and special theory of relativity, and his Annibus Mirabilis, otherwise translated to the year of miracles. He was just 26 years old, John. Many may not know he was also an avid violin player. And here's one that's really strange. The FBI, John, kept a file on him and had some 1,427 pages keeping an eye on Einstein. But even more incredible and not really publicized, did you know, John, that Einstein turned down an offer to become the president of Israel? That's how serious the world was about this exceptional man still today.
Well, he was one smart guy. He had an exceptional intelligence quotient. Yeah. And I still want to know who helped the Egyptians build the pyramids, because I don't think the slave laborers did it. I think
you're right.
There's something there that we don't know yet.
Well, John, maybe President Trump will reveal something, and I think something's coming, don't you, about whether or not this whole story of alien visitation is really something real. So let's hope we get some answers on that.
Well, somebody got mad at President Obama for saying something last week, somebody, in my opinion, forced him to go back to redo his words a little bit.
I think you're right. I don't think the presidents really know, but maybe in this case, maybe we'll get an answer. We always end off, John, on the great mystery of the week. How about this one? What are particles from space called Amaratsus, and what's the oh my God particle? Here we go. The most powerful energy source from space are cosmic rays. Now, we have some records here to talk about. Back in May of 2021, astronomers detected a particle known as the Amaratsu particle. It's named after the Japanese sun god. John, this goes off the charts. 240 quintillion electron volts. Nothing in the universe has been at least that powerful. Here's the problem. Astronomers look into the region where they think it came from. It's called the cosmic void. No galaxies, no stars, just empty space. And then to top it off, back on October 15th of 1991, they detected something called the oh my God particle. 320 quintillion electron volts. What a strange universe we live in. And by the way, John, cosmic rays are atomic nuclei and very highly charged protons. Isn't that amazing? How can something come from nowhere and yet be more powerful than anything that's somewhere?
Steve Cates, thank you for enhancing our minds every week, and I always listen to your show on what is it, Friday nights or midnight Friday, midnight Saturday morning to 2 a.m. and same on Sunday from midnight to 2 a.m. and I enjoy those shows very much.
Well, thank you, John. The Dr. Sky Experience continues to talk about those great realms: astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories, John, as you know best. Stories of American exceptionalism, truth, justice, and the American way. Have a great Sunday.
The Cats Roundtable.
What happened in the markets? Well, it was a roller coaster for a while. With us today is John Terrett. Give us a report.
Good morning. Well, there's really only one story, and that was Friday's SCOTUS decision, of course. That 6-3 majority against the president's tariffs. The court was asked to decide whether President Trump used the IEEPA laws, those emergency laws, granted to all presidents from Carter onwards in 79 for tariffs, whether that was legal or not. And if it was, did the emergency he was talking about, i.e. the imposition of tariffs, raise to the level of an unusual and extraordinary threat? Well, the court said no. And now President Trump can't even charge countries trying to import here even $1. He said it was a disgraceful decision, and he outlined alternatives, though they won't be as easy and smooth as the tariffs under IEEPA were. The president said he was deeply disappointed and ashamed of certain members of the Supreme Court. He said they'd be dancing in the street in foreign countries that have been ripped off for years. He said alternatives will be used. He said the income into America will increase even after this decision because he's going to use methods, practices, and authorities that make it even stronger to tariff countries from overseas than it was possible with IEEPA laws. He said great certainty had returned to the U.S. economy. He immediately proposed a 10% global tariff across the board. He's going to use the Trade Expansion Act of 62, the Trade Act of 74, the Tariffs Act of 1930 to do all of this. Now, John, what the court did not discuss at all was how companies who've been covering these tariffs since last April will get paid back. Names like Ford, GM, and Costco, they're going to have to file paperwork. They're going to have to line up in the courts. It could take a year. President Trump on Friday suggested it may even take 5 years. Justin Kavanaugh, one of the justices who sided with President Trump, said he thought the whole thing could be a mess. Away from tariffs, on Friday we got GDP, that's growth, that was weaker than expected. We got PCE inflation that was hotter than expected. The markets didn't really rally. We thought there might be a big sell-off. There wasn't in the end. The crypto story of the week, the big cryptocurrency event going on involving blockchain as well in Denver, Colorado, that's attended by crypto fans, not so much the executives from Wall Street. And so too the week ahead. Well, it's the State of the Union on Tuesday, and you've got to believe President Trump is going to look those justices squarely in the eye from the podium in the House on Tuesday evening. And then the next day, Wednesday the 25th, we get NVIDIA, the chip maker, with their latest set of earnings. John.
Thank you so much, and let's catch up again next week.
Yep, see you Sunday again. Thanks very much, John.
With us today is Steve Phillip. He is the new CEO of the Partnership of New York City, the 300 top companies of New York. Well, Stephen Phillip, you were the 49th mayor of Jersey City. Now you got a real challenge, running the Partnership of the City of New York. Tell us, where are we? We got a new mayor. You're the business person representing the 300 top companies of our city.
Yeah, so John, I'll tell you that this is a difficult situation, I think, for the city. The city's resilient, which is great. You know, everybody wants to be in New York City. I think the CEOs would say we're in uncharted territory, what it means to have a socialist mayor. A lot of things he says we don't believe in, but we're all rooting for the city and we want to see success. So we're going to see how this looks and where we can insert ourselves in a productive way.
Right now, you know, the real estate industry is a big industry in New York, and they're quite concerned. The banking industry is a big industry in New York. The hospitals is a big industry in New York. The universities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and a lot of them are worried. And during the last 2 weeks, when we had 4 weeks, we had the nursing strike. The new mayor was advising the nurses, not the hospitals.
Look, I think that there's going to be kind of growing pains where the mayor realizes, you know, how powerful and assertive he can be. I mean, I think the best place for him to have been there would have been brokering the deal, not on the picket line. But the transition from being an activist to being the executive is going to be a little bit of a process. So we'll see where it goes. I'll tell you, we had an executive board meeting for the partnership this morning, and there's definitely concern. There's no question about the business climate, about some of the rhetoric, growing anti-Semitism on the extreme left and the impact to quality of life throughout the city. There's more of a willingness to engage on advocacy and politics than there ever has been before, because they recognize that the city has gone in the direction that they're not entirely comfortable with. And their employees, they represent 800,000 employees here in New York, and some of those employees, many of those employees, are very concerned.
And in addition, the new mayor has threatened to raise taxes significantly. He's threatened to not allow the police department to hire an additional 5,000 police officers that was in the system to hire. He has said to the governor's office that we need more money. What do you want to pick on first?
I will tell you that my interactions with the mayor, he is very smart. He's in the weeds, which is a good thing, understanding the nuances of the budget challenges. And I think he sincerely wants to see the city succeed. And I think he's navigating a very, very tough political base that's very good to get you elected, but very tough to govern with those people on the extreme left. And I think that's a tough thing for him to navigate. So our job is to help him be successful where we're aligned. I don't think the tax conversation is productive because we are going to be 100% higher than New Jersey if we take that proposal. New Jersey's current corporate tax rate is 11%. If we do what the mayor has recommended, we'll be at 22%. It's 100% over New Jersey. So, you know, people don't have to move to Texas or Florida. They could just move a mile away, which is a real risk for the economy here in New York. People want to be in New York, but you got to have an economy that's competitive. And we're getting close to a place that it isn't.
We certainly don't want a mass exodus out of New York, because if he raises taxes to the extreme that they're talking about, it'll be a big number. For instance, the proposed budget for New York City is $127 billion. The whole state of Florida, of 24 million people, is 120 billion.
I think that New York has some opportunities, but they're politically tough. And I think that sometimes the most effective mayors are the ones that are willing to do the tough things politically and make decisions that always aren't popular with your base. And if you think about, as a starting point, you know, school funding in New York, I think that most people would acknowledge that it's flawed. I think that you've had two previous mayors that tried to address it. They weren't able. But if you look at it pragmatically, you've seen enrollment drop from 1.1 million to a little bit more than 800,000 while the budget has increased. I mean, we need to have a conversation about it. I think the rental relief program, it's an entitlement program, and I think most people would acknowledge that entitlement programs mostly happen at the federal level. It's very, very rare for a city to be driving an entitlement program like that. It costs billions of dollars a year. as well-intentioned as it is, you need to think about, how to make that stuff effective from a cost standpoint. I mean, you could go on all day with some difficult decisions that are right in front of him. And, our job is to be supportive where we can and think about it's not only taxes, because if people leave, you're going to have a bigger problem. And I would just say on the affordability crisis, I think everybody recognizes there's an affordability crisis. The best way to address the affordability crisis is have more jobs with better paychecks. That is the best way to address affordability, because most people know that costs don't come down. You could stabilize them. It's very, very difficult to drive costs down, but you need to increase wages and get people opportunities to make more money, and that means you have to have a good business climate so people hire and there are better jobs.
So somebody has to scratch their head and somebody has to run the business.
That's right. I mean, look, he has huge business leaders throughout New York City that are global leaders that manage huge budgets, huge number of employees. So, he has a resource that hopefully he taps into in order to, manage this situation. I mean, it's a very, very tough job he has. 300,000 employees, like you said, over $100 billion budget. Difficult. And so, the hope is that he leverages some of the resources that are here because people want to see him succeed.
Stephen Fulop, thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to talking very often.
Thank you.
And trying to work together to solve our city's problems, because we all love our city.
I appreciate you. Thank you. Have a great day.
The Cats Roundtable.
If you ever miss a segment or want to hear it again, go to WABCRadio.com, go to podcasts, go to minicast, and play back your favorite segment. Thank you for being with us for the Cats Roundtable Local Edition, the #1 show on Sunday mornings in New York. Keep listening to us for the Cats Roundtable National Edition between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock. So we'll be back to you in a few minutes after the news.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our country has to offer, especially health care. Across every state, every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.